My name is Harper. I'm 28 years old, and I'm standing outside my family lawyer's office holding a piece of paper that just shattered everything I thought I knew about my parents. The will is clear. $725,000, every single penny of their estate, left entirely to my younger sister Celeste. I stare at the numbers until they blur, my hands trembling as I remember 3 years ago when I asked them for $70,000 to start my business. It's too risky, Dad said, shaking his head like I'd asked him to burn cash. But my sister's wedding, her third house, her endless shopping sprees? I stood there, numb, realizing my parents believed my dream was too risky, but my sister's lavish lifestyle was worth $750,000. Before I tell you how I got here, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever felt overlooked by your own family, hit that like button because you'll want to hear every word of this. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happened next will show you that sometimes the people who doubt you the most are the ones who set you free. Now let me take you back to where it all started. 3 years ago, back in the spring of 2020, I was 25 years old and fresh out of my MBA program at Oregon State University. I'd spent 2 years researching, planning, and building a business proposal that I genuinely believed could change my life. My startup idea was a technology platform designed to connect small businesses with suppliers, cutting out the middleman and reducing costs for everyone involved. I'd worked on this concept since my undergraduate days, refining it through countless iterations, market research surveys, and prototype testing. By the time I graduated with my master's in business administration, I had a 50-page business plan, financial projections for 5 years, and letters of intent from 5 potential clients ready to sign contracts the moment I launched. The number I needed was $70,000. I'd broken it down meticulously. $30,000 for hiring 2 developers to build the platform's core features, $20,000 for the first 6 months of marketing and customer acquisition, and $20,000 for operational costs, including server hosting, legal fees, and a modest salary to keep myself afloat while getting the business off the ground. I wasn't asking for a handout. I'd drafted a formal loan agreement offering 8% annual interest, with full repayment guaranteed within 3 years. I had backup plans, contingency strategies, and even identified potential investors who might come in later if the initial launch proved successful. I organized a family dinner at my parents' house in the Portland suburbs on a Saturday evening in May. Their home was a comfortable 2-story colonial with a well-maintained lawn, the kind of place that spoke of middle-class stability and careful financial planning. My father, Roland, was 58 at the time, a sturdy man with graying hair who'd built a respectable construction company from the ground up. He employed about 20 workers and handled commercial renovation projects throughout the greater Portland area. My mother, Constance, was 55, serving as the chief accountant for Dad's company and managing all the family finances with meticulous attention to detail. She kept spreadsheets for everything, tracked every expense, and prided herself on their healthy savings account. Then there was my sister Celeste, 23 years old and freshly graduated from a design program at a local college. She hadn't secured stable employment yet, taking occasional freelance graphic design gigs while living rent-free in an apartment Dad owned downtown. That evening, she arrived wearing a new designer dress I recognized from a boutique that charged $300 minimum for anything on their racks. I'd prepared thoroughly for this presentation. I brought my laptop, printed copies of my business plan, market analysis charts, and financial projections. After we finished dinner, I stood up and asked everyone to give me 30 minutes. I walked them through the market opportunity, explained the pain points my platform would solve, showed them testimonials from business owners who'd expressed interest, and detailed exactly how their $70,000 investment would be deployed. I explained the competitive landscape, my go-to-market strategy, and realistic timelines for reaching profitability. I showed them that the small business supplier market was valued at over $15 billion annually, with plenty of room for disruption. I even brought letters from potential clients, stating they'd commit to 12-month contracts worth $18,000, combined in the first year alone. My father listened with his arms crossed, his expression growing increasingly skeptical as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Harper, do you know what percentage of startups fail in their first year?" I told him I did, that it was roughly 20%, and that Eid specifically designed my business model to avoid the common pitfalls. He shook his head slowly. The real number is much higher when you look at businesses that never even get off the ground. 90% of startups fail eventually. That's not risk, that's almost certain loss. My mother chimed in, her voice filled with concern rather than encouragement. Sweetheart, your father and I have worked for 35 years to save what we have. Every dollar in our account represents sacrifice, long hours, and careful planning. We can't just gamble that away on something that might not work out. I tried to explain that this wasn't gambling, that I had real clients ready to pay, that the market research validated the need, that I was offering them a formal contract with guaranteed repayment and interest. But Mom just kept shaking her head, saying, "What if something goes wrong? What if the clients back out? What if the technology doesn't work? We'd lose everything we set aside." Celeste sat quietly through most of this exchange, occasionally glancing at her phone. She seemed annoyed that the attention wasn't on her, that the evening's focus had shifted to my business dreams instead of whatever she wanted to discuss. When I looked at her desperately, hoping for some sisterly support, she just shrugged and said, "I mean, it does sound pretty risky, Harper." The conversation deteriorated quickly after that. I presented more evidence, more reassurances, more backup plans. I told them ED already been accepted into a startup accelerator program that would provide mentorship and connections. I explained that several angel investors had expressed preliminary interest if I could demonstrate early traction. I reminded them that ED graduated top of my class, that my professors had praised the business model, that ED won second place in the university's business plan competition against 60 other teams. None of it mattered. Dad's voice grew firm, taking on that authoritative tone it heard throughout childhood when a decision was final. "Harper, business isn't about hope and passion, it's about guarantees and proven models. You're asking us to risk a significant portion of our savings on an unproven concept in a competitive market. That's not responsible," Mom added. "We worked too hard to throw money away on a maybe. You need to understand that this isn't about believing in you personally, it's about making sound financial decisions." I felt tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall in front of everyone. I gathered my materials slowly, carefully putting each page back into the folder, closing my laptop with deliberate control. "So that's it?" I asked quietly. "You won't even consider it?" Dad shook his head. "We've considered it thoroughly, and the answer is no. It's too risky, Harper. Find another way." Celeste stood up as I was packing my things, walked over, and put her hand on my shoulder with an expression that seemed sympathetic but felt somehow performative. "Maybe it's for the best, sis," she said softly, her voice dripping with false comfort. "You know, not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you should look for a stable job with a good company instead. That's the safer path." I pulled away from her touch, mumbled something about needing to leave, and walked out of that house feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. That night, sitting in my tiny apartment, I made a decision. I would find another way. I would prove them wrong. I spent the next week researching small business loans and eventually secured $50,000 from a community bank at 12% annual interest, using my car as collateral. It wasn't the full 70 I'd asked for, but it would have to be enough. I was going to build this company with or without my family's support. The first 6 months after that rejection were the hardest period of my life. I worked from my 400-square-foot apartment, converting my bedroom into an office and sleeping on an air mattress in the living room. My daily routine started at 6 in the morning and rarely ended before midnight. I taught myself basic coding through online tutorials because I couldn't afford to hire developers full-time with my limited budget. I reached out to the developers I'd originally planned to hire and negotiated a contract arrangement where they'd build the core platform for $30,000 instead of working full-time, which saved me precious capital. I survived on instant ramen, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever I could buy in bulk from discount stores. My grocery budget was $50 a week maximum. I canceled my gym membership, stopped going out with friends, and cut every non-essential expense from my life. When my laptop died in month 3, I panicked before finding a refurbished replacement for $300 that I couldn't really afford. Every single dollar mattered. Every decision felt weighted with the potential to make or break everything I was building. The platform development took longer than expected. There were technical complications, integration issues with payment processors, and user interface problems that required multiple rounds of revisions. I spent countless nights troubleshooting code, watching tutorial videos at double speed, and pestering the contracted developers with questions until I understood every aspect of how the system worked. By month 4, I'd lost my first potential client because I couldn't deliver the features fast enough. That loss devastated me, not just financially, but emotionally. It felt like confirmation that maybe my parents had been right, maybe I was chasing an impossible dream. During this struggle, my family continued their lives as if nothing had happened. I saw through social media, because I couldn't help myself from checking, that Celeste had posted photos of a weekend trip to San Francisco, staying at a hotel that charged $400 per night. Shed tagged our parents in the post with a caption about family bonding time. And I hadn't been invited. The comments were full of people praising how close they all were, how lucky Celeste was to have such supportive parents. Then came the post that truly broke something inside me. It was Celeste's 24th birthday, just 8 months after they'd rejected my business proposal. She stood in front of a gleaming new BMW sedan, dark blue with leather interior, her arms spread wide and a huge smile on her face. The caption read, "Best birthday ever. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for the most amazing gift. I'm the luckiest daughter in the world." The car had a giant red bow on the hood. I looked up the model later that night, unable to stop myself. It was worth $45,000. I called my mother the next day, my hands shaking as I dialed. When she answered, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Hey Mom, I saw Celeste's post about the car. That's quite a birthday present." There was a pause on the other end before Mom said, "Oh, yes, well, she really needed reliable transportation for job interviews and client meetings. You know how important first impressions are in the design world." I gripped my phone tighter. "Mom, that car costs $45,000. You told me 8 months ago that you couldn't risk any money on my business." Another pause, longer this time. "Harper, that's different. A car is a tangible asset. Something concrete. Your business idea was speculative. Surely you can see the difference." I couldn't respond. I just hung up and sat in my apartment, staring at the walls. But I refused to give up. Month 9 brought the breakthrough I desperately needed. I signed my first real contract with a manufacturing company that needed help connecting with raw material suppliers. The contract was worth $15,000 over 12 months, and it validated everything ID believed about the market need. I used that success story to reach out to other potential clients, leveraging the testimonial to build credibility. By month 10, I had 3 clients and was generating enough revenue to hire my first employee part-time. Around this same time, Celeste announced her engagement. She posted a photo of an enormous diamond ring with her fiancé Preston, whose family owned a chain of car dealerships across Oregon and Washington. The engagement party was held at a country club, and based on the photos that saturated my social media feed, approximately 100 people attended. I received an invitation in the mail 2 weeks before the event, clearly an afterthought. I went, wearing a dress I'd bought at a thrift store for $20, and spent the evening watching my parents beam with pride as they introduced Preston's family to their extensive network of friends and relatives. Dad cornered me at one point during the party, champagne glass in hand, and said, "Your sister really found herself a good match, didn't she? Preston's family is very successful. They own 7 dealerships." I nodded politely. "That's great for her," he continued, not noticing or not caring about my tone. "This is what stability looks like, Harper. This is the kind of foundation that leads to a secure future." I excused myself to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall for 10 minutes, breathing slowly, reminding myself that my journey was different, and that was okay. As my first year in business concluded, I'd managed to grow the platform to 5 clients generating $200,000 in annual revenue. It hired 2 part-time employees, and was finally paying myself a modest salary of $36,000 per year. It wasn't the overnight success I'd dreamed of, but it was real, sustainable growth. I'd also managed to pay back $15,000 of my bank loan, staying current on payments despite the high interest rate. I invited my parents to dinner to share this progress, hoping that concrete results might change their perspective. They came, listened politely as I showed them the numbers, and offered congratulations that felt hollow. Dad said, "That's nice, honey. I'm glad it's working out so far." Then Mom immediately changed the subject. "Have you heard about the wedding plans? Celeste wants to have the ceremony at Cannon Beach next summer. It's going to be absolutely beautiful." 2 weeks after that dinner, Celeste called me with a request that would mark the first of many attacks on my resources and peace of mind. Her voice was bright and cheerful when I answered. "Harper, I have something so exciting to ask you. Will you be my maid of honor?" I was genuinely touched despite everything, feeling like maybe this was an olive branch, a recognition that I was important to her. "Of course," I said. "I'd be honored," she squealed with delight. "Oh, thank God. I was so hoping you'd say yes. Now, I need to tell you about the responsibilities. The maid of honor typically plans and pays for the bridal shower and the bachelorette party. I'm thinking we should do the shower at that gorgeous venue downtown, the one with the garden terrace, and for the bachelorette, definitely Vegas for a long weekend." My stomach dropped. "Celeste, those things are really expensive. I'm still building my business and money is extremely tight." Her voice cooled noticeably. "I thought your business was doing well? Isn't that what you told Mom and Dad? Were you just bragging?" I tried to explain that revenue wasn't the same as profit, that I was reinvesting everything back into growth, that I was still paying off substantial debt. She cut me off. "Fine, if you don't want to be maid of honor, I can ask someone else. I just thought my own sister would want to make my special day perfect." I felt trapped, manipulated, but also genuinely wanting to be there for her despite everything. No, I'll figure it out. Let me see what I can do." She perked up immediately. "Really? Oh, Harper, you're the best. I knew I could count on you. I'll send you my Pinterest boards with ideas for both events. Love you." She hung up before I could respond. The Pinterest boards revealed expectations that would cost at least $5,000 total. I looked at my business account, at my personal savings, at the loan balance I was still chipping away at. Then I called the bank and arranged to take a small personal loan of $3,000 at 18% interest. I planned a bridal shower that cost me that full amount, cutting corners where I could without making it obvious. Celeste complained about the decorations not matching her vision exactly, and my mother quietly suggested that perhaps I should have consulted with Celeste more during the planning process. I swallowed my frustration and smiled through it all. The 6 months leading up to Celeste's wedding consumed my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every conversation with my family revolved around wedding details, vendor selections, guest list debates, and Celeste's ever-changing opinions about centerpieces, color schemes, and menu options. My business was growing steadily. It reached 8 clients and was on track for $400,000 in annual revenue, but nobody in my family asked about it or seemed to care. The wedding preparations revealed the true extent of my parents' financial priorities. I learned through overheard conversations and carelessly disclosed details that they'd allocated $180,000 for the wedding itself. The venue was a luxury resort perched on the Oregon coastline overlooking Cannon Beach, with a ceremony space carved into the cliffside and a reception hall featuring floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Pacific Ocean. 250 guests would attend, traveling from across the country for what my mother kept calling the event of the decade. I found myself sitting at my parents' dining table one Sunday afternoon in January, 4 months before the wedding, while my mother reviewed budget spreadsheets with Celeste. I'd stopped by to drop off some papers Dad needed for a construction permit, and I ended up staying for coffee. Mom was explaining something about the floral arrangements when she said casually, "We've been saving for your wedding since you were a little girl, sweetheart. We always knew it would be expensive, but you only get married once, and we want it to be perfect." I couldn't help myself. "You've been saving for her wedding specifically since she was a child." Mom looked up, surprised by my tone. "Well, not specifically, but we always knew we'd help our daughters with wedding expenses when the time came." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "Did you set aside money for my wedding too?" There was an uncomfortable silence. Dad, who'd been reading the newspaper in his armchair, lowered it slowly. "Harper, you're not even dating anyone seriously. When you get engaged, well, discuss it then." That wasn't an answer, and we all knew it. Celeste jumped in quickly, her voice taking on that placating tone she used when she wanted to diffuse tension, while simultaneously redirecting attention to herself. "Anyway, Mom, about the dress situation. I think I want to upgrade to the designer gown I showed you instead of the one we ordered. It's a bit more expensive, but it's just so much more me." The bridal shower Eid planned and paid for took place on a Saturday in February at an upscale venue with a garden terrace. 40 women attended, including my mother's entire book club, Celeste's college friends, Preston's mother and sisters, and various cousins and family friends. Eid arranged for catered food, champagne, and mimosas. Elaborate decorations in Celeste's chosen color scheme of blush pink and gold, and party games that Eid researched extensively to ensure they were sophisticated enough for the crowd. Celeste arrived wearing a white dress that probably cost more than my entire event budget, and from the moment she walked in, I could see disappointment in her eyes. "The decorations weren't quite right," she whispered to her best friend within my hearing. "The gold was too bright, not the subtle champagne gold Shed envisioned. The flower arrangements, which Eid agonized over with the florist for hours, were pretty, but not quite what I pictured." When we played the games Edie carefully selected, she participated with visible reluctance, and I overheard her telling one of Preston's sisters, "My sister planned this, so you know, it's not quite the theme I wanted." My mother, instead of defending me or acknowledging the enormous effort and financial strain this had required, pulled me aside midway through the party and said quietly, "Sweetheart, maybe next time you should check with Celeste more directly about her preferences. I know you tried hard, but it's important that the bride feels like her vision is being honored." I nodded, went to the bathroom, locked the door, and cried silently for 5 minutes before fixing my makeup and returning to the party. The bachelorette party was worse. Celeste had insisted on 3 days and 2 nights in Las Vegas, staying at the Bellagio in suites that cost $600 per night. There were 8 of us total, and as maid of honor, I was expected to cover not just my own expenses but also contribute significantly to Celeste's costs, since the bride doesn't pay for her own bachelorette party. Between flights, hotel, meals at expensive restaurants, club cover charges and bottle service, spa treatments, and a private pool cabana rental, the weekend cost me $2,000 that I absolutely didn't have. I put it on a credit card with 21% interest, knowing I'd be paying it off for months. On the second night, after Celeste had consumed several cocktails at a nightclub where Wed reserved a VIP table, she draped her arm around me and said loudly to her friends, loud enough that I could hear clearly over the music, "My sister is always so serious about her little business. She doesn't know how to just let loose and have fun, that's why she's still single." Her friends laughed, and I felt humiliation wash over me. One of them, a woman I'd never met before that weekend, looked at me with something like pity and said, "Oh, you're the entrepreneur? That must be so stressful." Preston says most small businesses fail. I excused myself from the table, wandered through the casino floor until I found a quiet corner near a bank of slot machines, and called my mentor Rebecca from the entrepreneurship program Eid participated in during graduate school. She'd become a trusted confidant over the past year, checking in regularly and offering advice as I navigated the startup journey. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," I told her, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I can keep sacrificing for people who don't respect what I'm building." Rebecca listened and then said something that would stick with me. "Harper, you have to decide what matters more, their approval or your self-respect. You're never going to get both." 1 week before the wedding, Celeste called me in tears. "Harper, I need your help. I know this is last minute, but I changed my mind about the dress. The one Mom and Dad bought is beautiful, but it's not the one. I found the perfect dress, the one I'm meant to wear, but it costs $8,000 more, and the wedding is in 7 days, and Mom and Dad already spent so much, and I don't know what to do." I could hear the manipulation in her voice, the calculated crying, but part of me still wanted to believe my sister genuinely needed help. "Celeste, I don't have $8,000. I'm still paying off the shower in Vegas." She sobbed harder. "You're so selfish. This is my one special day, the most important day of my entire life, and you won't help me? What kind of sister are you?" I felt anger rising, genuine anger for the first time. "I've spent over $8,000 total on your wedding already. I've put myself in debt for you. I can't do more. She hung up on me. 10 minutes later, my father called. His voice was stern. Harper, your sister called me very upset. She says you refused to help with her dress situation. I explained that Eid already contributed far beyond my means, that I was carrying credit card debt because of this wedding, that I simply couldn't afford more. He sighed heavily. Harper, family helps family. Your sister is in a difficult position, and you have a successful business now. Can't you sacrifice just a little bit more to make her day perfect? The word sacrifice echoed in my head. Dad, I asked you to invest in my business, and you said it was too risky. Now you're asking me to go further into debt for a dress. He was silent for a moment. That's different, and you know it. This is about family. I refused, firmly and finally, and the call ended coldly. The wedding day arrived on a perfect June afternoon. The Pacific Ocean sparkled behind the ceremony space, waves crashing against rocks far below the clifftop venue. 250 guests filled white chairs arranged in neat rows, and I stood at the front in a simple blush-colored dress that Celeste had selected for the bridal party. She looked stunning in her original dress, having convinced Mom and Dad to somehow find the extra money for the designer gown shed wanted, though I never learned the details of how they'd managed it. During the ceremony, I watched my parents in the front row, my mother dabbing tears of joy with a handkerchief, my father beaming with unmistakable pride. When Celeste said her vows, talking about love and family and partnership, my mother actually whispered, "That's my girl," loud enough for several rows to hear. I felt invisible standing there, in my designated spot, a prop in someone else's perfect day. At the reception, which featured a 5-course meal prepared by a celebrity chef, a 12-piece band, and an open bar stocked with premium liquor, my parents circulated among the guests with visible pride. I overheard my father introducing me to Preston's uncle, a wealthy real estate developer. This is our older daughter Harper. She runs a small online business, computer stuff mostly. His tone was dismissive, almost apologetic, as if my work was something to briefly mention before moving on to more interesting topics. When he introduced Celeste minutes later to the same uncle, his voice swelled with pride. And this is our beautiful bride Celeste, now married into the Morrison family. Preston's father owns the Morrison Auto Group, 7 dealerships across 2 states. We're so proud of the match she's made. I danced when required, smiled when photographed, and gave a toast as maid of honor that I'd carefully written to be supportive while remaining emotionally detached. I talked about childhood memories with Celeste, wished her genuine happiness, and raised my glass alongside 249 other people. Then I left as soon as politely possible, drove back to my apartment in Portland, and sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before going inside. The total damage to my finances: $8,300 spent on someone else's celebration, while my own business struggled to secure enough operating capital to hire the engineers I desperately needed. I looked at my credit card statements that night and calculated it would take me 14 months to pay off the debt if I dedicated every spare dollar to it. I'd sacrificed my financial stability for someone who complained that I hadn't sacrificed enough. The 2 years following Celeste's wedding marked explosive growth for my company. By late 2023, WED expanded to 30 clients, gross revenue reached $1.2 million annually, and I'd built a team of 8 employees working from a small but professional office space in downtown Portland. We were featured in a Forbes article highlighting rising entrepreneurs under 30 in the Pacific Northwest. And I'd been invited to speak at 3 industry conferences about disrupting traditional supply chain models. The Forbes article changed how my parents interacted with me. The morning it published online, my mother called before 8 o'clock, which was unusual since she knew I typically started work early. "Harper, your father and I just read the most wonderful article about you. We're so proud, sweetheart. We always knew you had potential." I thanked her cautiously, surprised by the sudden enthusiasm. "We should celebrate," she continued. "Let's have dinner this weekend, our treat. We want to hear all about how the business is growing." That Saturday, we met at an upscale steakhouse that my parents had selected, the kind of place where entrees started at $45 and the wine list was leather-bound. Dad was in an expansive mood, ordering appetizers and an expensive bottle of red wine, telling the waiter to bring my daughter whatever she wants. She's a successful business owner now. Over perfectly cooked ribeyes, they asked question after question about the company's revenue, profit margins, client acquisition strategies, and growth projections. Dad leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass, and said, "I always knew you had it in you, Harper. You've got that same entrepreneurial drive I had when I started my construction company. It's in your blood." I set down my fork carefully. "Dad, 2 years ago you told me my business idea was too risky to support." He waved his hand dismissively. "That was before you'd proven the concept. Now you've got real traction, real revenue. That changes everything. I wasn't wrong to be cautious then, but I'm happy to be proven wrong about the outcome." My mother nodded enthusiastically. "We were just being protective parents, honey. You have to understand that we couldn't risk our savings on something unproven. But now that you've established yourself, we're just so proud of what you've accomplished on your own." The praise felt hollow, transactional, like they were investors evaluating past decisions rather than parents celebrating a daughter's success. But I wanted so desperately to believe that maybe, finally, they recognized my worth. Maybe the years of being overlooked were behind us. Maybe this was the beginning of a different relationship with my family. 2 weeks later, Dad called my office directly, which was unusual. "Harper, I need to ask you something business to business. My construction company is going through a temporary cash flow issue. We bid on 3 large projects and won them all, which is great, but the upfront material costs are substantial and the clients won't pay until milestones are reached. I need to cover payroll for my crew for the next 2 months while we wait for those payments to come through." I asked how much he needed. $40,000. "I'll pay you back within 6 months, guaranteed. Think of it as a business loan between entrepreneurs. I'll sign whatever paperwork you need." I hesitated, my financial instincts warning me this was complicated territory. "Dad, that's a significant amount. My company is growing, but we're also reinvesting heavily in development. It'd need to pull from our operating reserves." His voice took on a harder edge. "Harper, I supported you your whole life. I paid for your education, your apartment during college, everything. Now I'm asking for a short-term loan with full intention to repay, and you're hesitating? Is this really how you're going to treat your father?" The guilt worked. I agreed, had my lawyer draft a simple promissory note, and transferred $40,000 from my business account to Dad's construction company. He signed the paperwork, thanked me effusively, and promised I'd have the money back with interest within 6 months. "You're a lifesaver, honey. This is what family does for each other." 3 months passed with no word about repayment. I was preparing to expand our office space and hire 3 more engineers, which required careful financial planning. I called Dad casually one evening to ask about the loan timeline. "Oh, that," he said vaguely. "Business has been slower than expected. The projects we won ran into permit delays, so the clients haven't paid yet. I need another 3 months at least." I explained that I was making significant business decisions based partly on expecting that capital to be returned. "Harper, don't pressure me about this. I'm under enormous stress trying to keep my company afloat. You'll get your money when I can pay it." Another 3 months went by. I was at 9 months since the loan, 3 months past the promised repayment date, and Dad hadn't mentioned it once during our occasional family dinners. I brought it up again, more directly this time. His response shocked me. "Harper, I'm your father, not a bank. Can't you be more flexible about this? The economy has been tough, construction work is unpredictable, and I'm doing the best I can. You've got a successful company making good money. You don't need that $40,000 right now like I do." I called my mother separately, hoping she might intervene or at least acknowledge the awkwardness of the situation. She sighed deeply when I explained my concern. "Sweetheart, your father is under tremendous stress right now. Business really has been difficult. And he's worried about making payroll every week. Can you please not add to his burden by pressuring him about money? We raised you better than that." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Mom, this isn't a gift. It's a loan that he promised to repay." She lowered her voice to that tone she used when disappointed in me. "Family should help each other without keeping score. If you're going to treat your own father like a debtor, maybe you've let business success go to your head." I hung up feeling angry and confused, but I stopped asking about the money. I didn't want to be the villain in their narrative. I adjusted my expansion plans, scaled back on 3 hires, and made do with smaller office space than ID wanted. The business continued growing despite these constraints, but I felt resentful every time I had to make a compromise because $40,000 of my capital was tied up in a loan that was never going to be repaid. Then came the Facebook post that made everything clear. I was scrolling through my feed during a coffee break when I saw photos Celeste had uploaded. She stood in front of a gorgeous modern house with a manicured front lawn, a 2-car garage, and a sold sign in the yard. The caption read, "Dreams really do come true. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for helping with the down payment on our forever home. We couldn't have done this without your incredible generosity and support. Feeling so blessed and loved." House hunting was such a journey, but we finally found the one in the perfect neighborhood for starting our family. Can't wait to host everyone for holidays in our beautiful new space. I clicked through the photos showing gleaming hardwood floors, a chef's kitchen with marble countertops, a master suite with a walk-in closet the size of my current bedroom, and a backyard with space for the children Celeste was already planning. The comments section was filled with congratulations, and several people asked about the house details. Celeste responded enthusiastically, "It's $650,000. Preston's income qualified us for the mortgage, but Mom and Dad gifted us the down payment, which was a lifesaver because saving that much would have taken forever." I did the math instantly. Standard down payment on a house that price would be 20% to avoid mortgage insurance. That meant $130,000. My parents had given my sister $130,000 while telling me they couldn't afford to help me repay a $40,000 loan that was supposed to be returned months ago. I called my mother immediately, not caring that it was 10 o'clock at night. "Mom, I just saw Celeste's post about the house. Did you and Dad really give her $130,000 for a down payment?" There was a long pause. "Harper, your father and I chose to help your sister buy a home. That's our decision to make with our own money." I could barely control my voice. "You have $40,000 of my money that you haven't repaid, and you just gave Celeste more than 3 times that amount." She became defensive. "That's different. Your sister has a family now. She's thinking about having children. They needed a stable home in a good school district. You're single, your business is doing well, you don't have the same needs she does." I sat in my office, staring at my computer screen, realizing with perfect clarity that I had never been equal in my parents' eyes and I never would be. Celeste's needs would always be prioritized, her desires would always be funded, and my accomplishments would always be minimized. "Mom, do you understand how unfair this is? I've worked myself to exhaustion building something from nothing, and you treat it like a hobby. Celeste gets handed everything, and you act like she's earned it through some superior life choice." My mother's voice grew cold. "If you're going to be resentful and bitter about your own sister's happiness, then maybe you need to examine your priorities. We won't apologize for helping our daughter buy a house." That conversation marked the first major crack in my relationship with my family. I started declining dinner invitations, responding to texts with one-word answers, and avoiding family gatherings when possible. I couldn't sit at their table anymore, pretending everything was fine while knowing they valued my sister's comfort over my sacrifice. 6 months after the house revelation, Celeste announced her pregnancy during a family dinner I'd reluctantly attended. She shared the news with a video montage on her phone, showing positive pregnancy tests, ultrasound images, and her and Preston's reactions. My parents were overjoyed, immediately planning baby showers, discussing nursery themes, and talking about their future as grandparents. Mom hugged Celeste tightly and said, "Oh, sweetheart, this is the most wonderful news. We're going to spoil this baby absolutely rotten." I congratulated Celeste, sincerely, genuinely happy for her despite everything between us. I asked about her due date, how she was feeling, whether they'd find out the gender. For a brief moment, it felt like we were just sisters again, sharing an important life event. Then Dad raised his wine glass and made a toast, to Celeste and Preston, and to the newest member of our family. This is what life is really about, building a legacy, raising the next generation. We're so proud of the life you've built together. The baby shower fell to me by default. Celeste called 2 months into her pregnancy with detailed expectations. "I'm thinking we should do it at the riverfront garden venue. They have that gorgeous glass pavilion. I want an elegant tea party theme, maybe 50 guests, and we should hire a professional photographer because I want beautiful memories of this day. I calculated mentally that the venue alone would cost $2,000 before catering, decorations, or anything else. Celeste, I just invested $20,000 in a new marketing campaign for my business. My budget is tight right now. Can we do something more modest? Her voice turned sharp immediately. Modest? This is your niece or nephew we're celebrating. Don't you care about that? Or is your business the only thing that matters to you? I tried explaining that revenue and profit were different, that business growth required constant reinvestment, that I was still recovering financially from her wedding expenses. She cut me off. You make over $1 million a year according to that Forbes article. Don't tell me you can't afford to throw your sister a nice baby shower. I compromised by organizing a shower that cost me $2,000, significantly less than what Celeste wanted but still more than I could comfortably afford. I booked a smaller venue, handled decorations myself, and found a photography student who charged a fraction of professional rates. Celeste was visibly disappointed when she arrived, commenting that the space was smaller than I pictured and the decorations were cute, but not quite the elegant look I was hoping for. My mother pulled me aside during the event and suggested that perhaps I should have budgeted more generously for such an important occasion. When Celeste gave birth to a baby girl in late March, I visited the hospital with a gift basket worth $500, filled with organic baby clothes, premium skincare products for new mothers, and a silver-engraved rattle. Celeste opened the gift while I was there, looked through the items, and said with barely concealed disappointment, "Oh, this is nice. I thought you might do something more substantial, considering how well your business is doing." Preston's parents gave us a $10,000 contribution to the baby's college fund. 2 months after the baby was born, Celeste called me crying. "Harper, I don't know what to do. Preston lost his job. They let him go last week, some kind of performance review issue, and we're panicking. We have the mortgage, the baby, all these expenses, and we're going to run out of savings in a couple months." I felt sympathy despite our strained relationship. "That's really tough, Celeste. What's Preston doing about finding new work?" She sobbed harder. "He's applying everywhere, but nothing is coming through quickly enough. We need help right now. Can you loan us $25,000 to get through the next few months while he finds something?" Every alarm bell in my head was ringing. I'd learned my lesson with my father's unpaid loan. "Celeste, I can't do that. I'm sorry you're in a difficult position, but I have my own financial obligations, and I've learned that family loans don't work out well." Her crying stopped abruptly, and her voice turned vicious. "You're heartless, absolutely heartless. I can't believe we're related. Your own sister is struggling with a new baby and you won't help? What kind of person are you?" She immediately called our parents, and within an hour my father phoned me. "Harper, your sister told me about her situation with Preston's job. She needs help and you refused her. What's going on with you?" I explained that I couldn't afford to make large personal loans that might not be repaid, especially given that Dad still owed me $40,000 from over a year ago. His voice exploded with anger. "How dare you bring that up? I raised you, I fed you, I clothed you, I paid for your education. Does that mean nothing? You owe me far more than $40,000 for everything I've given you." My mother called 30 minutes later, her voice thick with tears. "Harper, sweetheart, we sacrificed so much for you girls. We worked our whole lives to give you opportunities. Now your sister desperately needs help and you're keeping score about money? What happened to you? When did you become so cold?" I tried to explain my position calmly. "Mom, this isn't about being cold. It's about boundaries and financial responsibility. I've helped repeatedly and been taken advantage of. I can't keep sacrificing my own stability." She wouldn't hear it. "If you don't help your sister, don't expect to be welcomed at family gatherings anymore. We can't support this behavior." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I felt something break inside my chest. "Mom, are you seriously telling me that my place in this family is conditional on giving Celeste money?" Her voice was firm. "We're telling you that family helps family, and if you can't understand that basic principle, then maybe you need to think about what matters more to you, money or your family." 3 days later, Celeste sent a long text message late at night, clearly typed in anger. I've been thinking about everything, and I realize now that you've never actually cared about this family. You were always just focused on yourself, your plans, your business. Mom and Dad sacrificed everything for us, and you repay them by keeping financial score like some kind of accountant? Preston and I are building a real life, raising a child, contributing to society in meaningful ways. What are you doing? Making money? That's not a legacy, Harper. That's just greed. Don't bother calling or visiting. We don't need your resentment and bitterness around our daughter. I sat in my apartment reading that message over and over, each word landing like a physical blow. For the first time since starting my business, I genuinely questioned whether any of it had been worth it. It sacrificed relationships, peace of mind, and family connection to build something that my family saw as evidence of selfishness rather than achievement. The 2 weeks following my sister's text message were the darkest of my adult life. I stopped answering calls from my parents, ignored messages from extended family members who'd clearly heard some version of events, and threw myself into work as a form of escape. But for the first time since starting my company, I couldn't focus. I sat in meetings with clients barely hearing what they said, stared at financial reports without comprehending the numbers, and found myself making uncharacteristic mistakes that my team had to correct. Then disaster struck in the form of a phone call from my largest client, a manufacturing company that represented 30% of our total revenue. Harper, I wanted to give you personal notice before it becomes official. We're ending our contract at the end of this quarter. We've decided to move to a larger platform provider that can offer more comprehensive services. This isn't about your work quality, which has been excellent, but about our needs as we scale. I'm sorry. I thanked him professionally, ended the call, and immediately opened our financial projections. Losing that client meant a revenue hit of $360,000 annually. We'd need to cut costs dramatically to maintain profitability, which meant letting staff go. I spent the entire afternoon running scenarios, calculating severance packages, trying to figure out how to keep the company viable while losing nearly a third of our income. 2 days later, I called 2 of my employees into the conference room and delivered the news that I had to let them go. Both were talented, hardworking people who'd been with me since the early days, and I felt like I was failing them. One of them, a developer named Marcus, took it professionally, but I saw the worry in his eyes as he nodded and asked about timing. The other, a client success manager named Jenna, started crying. "I just bought a condo," she said quietly. "I thought this job was secure." I gave them both generous severance packages that I couldn't really afford, and spent the rest of that day sitting alone in my office wondering if I should just shut the company down and take a corporate job somewhere. For the first time since that initial rejection from my parents, I genuinely considered quitting. I was exhausted, emotionally devastated, and financially stretched. The company felt like it was built on sand, one major client loss away from collapse. My family had abandoned me. I had no romantic relationship to provide emotional support. My friends from college had drifted away as I'd devoted every waking hour to building the business. I sat in my empty office at 9 o'clock at night, the rest of the team having gone home, and seriously wondered if all the sacrifice had been pointless. The networking event a week later was something I attended only because Marcus, one of the employees I'd let go, called and insisted I needed to get out of my own head. "There's a women in business conference downtown this weekend. I know you probably don't feel like going, but you need to be around other entrepreneurs right now. Trust me on this." I almost declined, but something in his voice made me agree. That's where I met Rebecca, though I'd heard of her before from business articles and industry gossip. She'd founded a regional accounting firm that had grown to over 100 employees across 4 states, and she was in her early 50s with gray-streaked hair and an air of calm confidence that drew people to her. We ended up sitting next to each other during a panel discussion, and afterward, when I was standing alone near the coffee station, she approached me. "You look like someone carrying the weight of the world." I recognized that expression because I wore it for years. I laughed weakly. "That obvious." She smiled. "Only to someone who's been there, want to grab coffee and talk." Over the next hour, I told her everything. The rejection from my parents, building the company alone, the constant financial demands from my family, the unpaid loan, my sister's attacks, the ultimatum, the client loss, and the overwhelming sense that I was drowning. She listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "My family disowned me when I started my business 30 years ago. My father told me that women weren't meant to run companies, that I was abandoning my responsibilities as a wife and mother, that I'd fail and humiliate the family name. My mother sided with him. My siblings treated me like I'd committed some unforgivable sin by wanting more than they thought I deserved." I stared at her. "What happened?" She took a sip of her coffee. "I cut them out of my life completely. It was the hardest decision I ever made, but it was also what saved me. I built my business, built a chosen family of people who respected what I was creating, and eventually built a life that I'm proud of. My parents died without us reconciling. I don't regret cutting ties, but I do regret that they never chose to see me for who I really was." She leaned forward. "Harper, family doesn't define your worth, your resilience does. And, from what you've told me, you're one of the most resilient people I've met." We exchanged contact information, and she insisted I call her if I needed advice or just someone to talk to. "I mean it," she said firmly. "Building a business while dealing with family betrayal is nearly impossible to do alone. Let me be in your corner." For the first time in weeks, I felt a small spark of hope. Rebecca proved to be exactly the ally I needed. She introduced me to 2 potential clients who became major accounts, replacing most of the revenue I'd lost. She reviewed my business financials and pointed out areas where I was being too cautious with growth investments. She recommended a therapist who specialized in family estrangement and business owner stress. Most importantly, she reminded me regularly that choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. My finances began stabilizing again as the new clients ramped up their contracts. I signed an $80,000 deal that would run for 2 years, providing steady, predictable income. I was slowly climbing out of the hole that the client loss had created. But my family situation remained unresolved and toxic. A month after meeting Rebecca, my father called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. His voice was warmer than our last conversation, almost friendly. "Harper, sweetheart, we've missed you at family dinners. Your mother and I were talking and we realized we haven't seen you in over 2 months. That's too long. How about you come over this Sunday and we can all catch up?" I felt a rush of emotions, the child in me desperately wanting to believe this was genuine, that maybe my parents had realized how badly they'd hurt me. "Okay," I said cautiously. "I can do Sunday." The dinner started pleasantly enough. Mom had made pot roast, my favorite meal from childhood. Dad asked about work in general terms, and I shared some updates about recent client wins. Celeste wasn't there, which was a relief. For about 45 minutes, it almost felt normal. Then, over dessert, Dad cleared his throat and said, "So, Harper, there's something we wanted to discuss with you. Your sister and Preston are still struggling financially with his job situation. We've been helping them out month to month, but we're stretched thin ourselves. We were hoping you might reconsider lending them the money they asked for. Not the full $25,000, maybe just 15 or 20 to help them get through this rough patch." Everything clicked into place. This wasn't a reconciliation dinner. This was a manipulation tactic, softening me up to ask for money again. I set down my fork carefully. "Dad, this dinner was never about missing me, was it? It was about getting me to agree to loan Celeste money." He looked genuinely surprised. "Of course we miss you. But yes, we're also concerned about your sister's family. Those 2 things aren't mutually exclusive." I stood up. "I think I should leave." My mother's voice turned, pleading. "Harper, please don't be difficult about this. We're trying to keep this family together, but you keep pulling away whenever anyone needs anything from you." I looked at both of them, these people who had raised me and shaped me, and who I'd spent my entire life trying to please. "You know what I finally understand? This family doesn't want me. It wants my money. You rejected my dreams when I needed you. You've taken from me repeatedly without repaying. You've prioritized Celeste at every turn, and now you invite me to dinner purely to extract more resources. I'm done." I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door. Dad called after me, his voice hard. "If you walk out that door, don't expect us to welcome you back." I turned and looked at him. "Good, that's exactly what I need from you, permission to leave." I drove home, not crying, not angry, just numb. I felt like Id finally severed something that had been strangling me slowly for years. It hurt, but it also felt like I could breathe for the first time in a very long time. 3 weeks after walking out of my parents' house, I received an unexpected call from my cousin Ethan. We'd been close as children, but had moved to Seattle for work 5 years ago, and we'd fallen out of regular contact. "Hey Harper, I'm in Portland for a few days visiting Mom. Wanna grab dinner?" I agreed, grateful for any friendly face. Over Thai food in a restaurant downtown, Ethan asked how I was doing, and I gave him the sanitized version about business going well but family relationships being strained. He nodded slowly, then set down his chopsticks. "Harper, I need to tell you something, and you're probably going to be upset, but you deserve to know. I was at your parents' house for Thanksgiving last year, and I overheard a conversation between Celeste and your mom that I can't stop thinking about." My stomach tightened. "What kind of conversation?" He looked uncomfortable. "Celeste was complaining about you to your mom. She said you'd become arrogant since your business got featured in Forbes, that you were always bragging about how successful you were and making her feel inferior. She told your mom that you'd made comments about Preston not being ambitious enough and about their lifestyle being unsustainable without your parents' help. Your mom was agreeing with her, saying that success had changed you, made you forget where you came from." I felt like I'd been punched. I never said any of those things. I barely talk about my business with them because they've never been interested. Ethan nodded. "I know, that's why I'm telling you. I've watched Celeste manipulate your parents about you for years. She's always been jealous of your drive and intelligence, and once you actually became successful, it got worse. She poisons them against you every chance she gets." I asked if there was more. Ethan hesitated. "Your mom also said something that really bothered me. She was talking to Aunt Linda, and I overheard her say, and this is pretty much word for word, Celeste is building a real life with a family and stability. Harper is always chasing these unrealistic business dreams. I worry she'll end up alone and regretful. This was like 6 months ago, after your company was clearly successful. The betrayal of hearing my own mother talk about me that way to extended family was almost worse than the ongoing financial favoritism." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. He looked genuinely regretful. "I should have. I was cowardly. I didn't want to get in the middle of family drama. But after Mom mentioned you seemed really isolated lately, I realized staying silent was worse than speaking up. Something Rebecca had mentioned weeks earlier came back to me. Shed suggested that if I really wanted to understand my family's financial situation, there were legal ways to investigate. I'd dismissed it as too invasive then, but now I wondered if I needed concrete evidence to fully break free from the gaslighting. "Ethan, if I hired someone to look into my parents' finances, just to verify some things, would you think that was crazy?" He shook his head. "Harper, if they're treating you this badly while hiding financial information, you have every right to know the truth. Do what you need to do." I hired a private investigator recommended by my business lawyer. It felt extreme and uncomfortable, but I needed to know if my parents were genuinely struggling financially, or if they were simply choosing to prioritize Celeste while claiming poverty to me. The investigator was thorough and professional, explaining that financial records were more accessible than most people realized through public documents, credit reports, and property records. 3 weeks later, I sat in my office after hours reading the investigator's report, and each page made me feel sicker. My parents had $400,000 in combined savings and investment accounts. They owned their home outright, valued at $550,000. Dad's construction company was profitable, generating $120,000 annually in net income. They had no significant debts. The report detailed every major expenditure from the past 3 years. $180,000 for Celeste's wedding, $130,000 for her house down payment, $45,000 for her car, and a recently opened investment account specifically labeled Grandchildren's Education Fund with $100,000, explicitly noting it was for Celeste's children only. Then came the devastating part. The $40,000 they'd borrowed from me with promises to repay within 6 months? Bank records showed that money had been transferred to Celeste 2 weeks after I'd loaned it, with a notation describing it as a kitchen renovation gift. My parents had never needed that money for their business. They'd taken it from me under false pretenses and given it to my sister. But the worst revelation was still coming. The investigator had managed to obtain information about Celeste's finances as well. She had $80,000 in a personal savings account. Her husband Preston hadn't been fired for performance issues, had quit his job voluntarily to take time off and explore career options. They were both employed currently, Celeste doing freelance design work, and Preston working at his father's dealership. The entire story about being desperate for money had been a fabrication. I sat alone in my dark office, the Portland city lights glowing through the windows, and felt the last threads of family loyalty dissolve. Every excuse I'd made for them, every benefit of doubt I'd extended, every moment I'd blamed myself for being difficult or selfish, it was all built on lies. They had money. They had always had money. They simply chose to give it all to one daughter while manipulating the other daughter into providing more. I called Rebecca immediately, not caring that it was 9 o'clock at night. She answered on the second ring. "Harper? Are you okay?" I told her everything the report had revealed. She was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" I took a breath. "I'm going to confront them. All of them. With evidence. I'm going to make sure they can never lie to me or themselves again about what they've done." Rebecca's voice was firm. "Then do it smart. Don't go alone, don't get emotional, and don't let them turn it around on you. Stick to facts, set boundaries, and walk away with your head high. You deserve that closure." Over the next week, I prepared methodically. I organized every piece of evidence into a presentation document. I made copies of the loan agreement my father had signed, screenshots of Celeste's social media posts about the house and car, excerpts from the investigator's report highlighting key financial data, and a timeline showing every instance where I'd been asked for money while they were giving large sums to my sister. I sent an email to my parents, Celeste, Preston, and several key family members including Ethan, my Aunt Linda, and my Uncle George. The subject line was, "Family Meeting, Mandatory Attendance." The body of the email was simple. "We need to discuss important family financial matters. Sunday, 2 p.m., at the Riverside Restaurant private dining room. This concerns everyone and requires your presence." I'd chosen a public restaurant specifically to prevent emotional explosions, knowing they'd be forced to maintain some level of decorum. Sunday arrived cold and rainy, typical Portland November weather. I got to the restaurant an hour early and set up my laptop connected to a large screen I'd rented. I arranged printed copies of key documents at each seat around the table. My hands were steady as I worked, my mind clear. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth. My family arrived in clusters. Ethan came first, giving me a supportive nod as he took his seat. My aunt and uncle arrived looking confused about why they'd been summoned. My parents walked in together, my father's expression darkening when he saw the formal setup. "What is this, Harper?" he demanded. I gestured to the chairs. "Please sit down. This won't take long, but everyone needs to hear it." Celeste and Preston arrived last, 10 minutes late. Celeste looked annoyed. "This better be important, Harper. We have plans this afternoon." I waited until everyone was seated, then stood at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming. I asked you here because I need to address 3 years of lies, manipulation, and financial exploitation, and I need witnesses to what I'm about to say so that no one can rewrite this history later." My father started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "Dad, you'll have time to respond, but first, you're going to listen. 3 years ago, I asked you and Mom to invest $70,000 in my startup. You told me it was too risky, that you'd worked too hard to gamble your savings on an unproven business. I accepted that decision and built my company anyway, taking on high-interest debt and working myself to exhaustion. I'm going to walk everyone through what happened after that rejection." I pulled up the first slide showing a timeline. "In the 3 years since you told me you couldn't risk money on my business, you've spent over $350,000 on Celeste. $180,000 for her wedding, $130,000 for her house down payment, and $45,000 for her car. These are documented through social media posts, public records, and bank transactions." I showed screenshots of Celeste's Facebook posts with dates and captions clearly visible. Celeste's face flushed red. "Those were gifts. Parents are allowed to help their children." I nodded. "You're absolutely right. Parents can choose to help their adult children however they want with their own money. But let's talk about my money now. I pulled up the promissory note. Dad, 1 year ago, you asked to borrow $40,000 for your construction company. You told me you had cash flow problems and needed to make payroll. You signed this promissory note promising repayment within 6 months. I looked directly at him. That was 14 months ago. I never received a single payment. When I asked about it, you told me I was pressuring you and that I should be more flexible because you're my father. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I continued. Here is what I recently discovered. I pulled up the investigator's report. 2 weeks after I transferred that $40,000 to your business account, you transferred the exact same amount to Celeste's personal account with a notation describing it as a kitchen renovation gift. You didn't need that money for payroll, Dad. You took it from me under false pretenses and gave it to my sister. The room erupted. My mother gasped. Ethan shook his head slowly. My Aunt Linda said, "Roland, tell me that's not true." My father stood up. "How dare you investigate our private finances? What gives you the right?" I remained calm. "What gave you the right to lie to me and steal from my business?" Because that's what this was. Theft, through deception. I turned to Celeste before anyone could derail the conversation further. Your turn. 2 months ago, you called me crying and desperate, claiming Preston had been fired and you needed $25,000 to survive. You said you'd run out of savings within months. I refused and you called me heartless. I pulled up bank records. These documents show that at the time of that call, you had $80,000 in savings. Preston wasn't fired. He quit voluntarily and was working at his father's dealership within 3 weeks. You lied about being in crisis to try to extract money from me. Celeste stood up, her chair scraping loudly. This is ridiculous. You're humiliating us in front of the whole family because you're jealous. You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad love me more. Her voice was shrill, desperate. I shook my head. This isn't about love, Celeste. This is about honesty and respect, things you've never shown me. I turned back to my parents. But the worst part, the thing that made me realize this family is truly toxic, was discovering your will. I pulled up the document that my lawyer had helped me obtain through legal channels since my name had originally been listed as a beneficiary before being removed. You removed me from your will entirely 9 months ago. Every asset, estimated at over $800,000 between savings, investments, and property, goes solely to Celeste. The notation you had the lawyer write states that I'm financially independent and don't require inheritance. You made this decision while owing me $40,000 that you never intended to repay. My mother started crying. Harper, we were going to tell you eventually. We thought you'd understand that your sister needs the security more than you do. I looked at her with something close to pity. Mom, you told Aunt Linda that I was chasing unrealistic business dreams while Celeste was building a real life. You said this after my company had been featured in Forbes. After I'd built something generating over $1 million annually. You told relatives I was arrogant and had changed, when in reality, I barely spoke about my business because none of you ever asked. Ethan spoke up. I can confirm that. I was there when Constance said those things. My mother looked betrayed. Ethan, how could you? He shrugged. How could you talk about your daughter that way? Harper deserves better than this. Preston tried to defend Celeste. Look, families help each other. Maybe Harper has been selfish by not contributing more when she can afford it. I turned to him. Preston, I spent over $8,000 on your wedding that I couldn't afford. I went into debt for a bachelorette party and bridal shower. I've given and given while being told I'm selfish for asking that a loan be repaid. The problem isn't that I won't contribute. The problem is that this family sees me as an ATM, not as a person. I looked around the table at everyone assembled. I called you all here because I need witnesses to what I'm about to say. I am done. I will not be your backup plan, your emergency fund, or your scapegoat. You can keep your inheritance, your favoritism, and your lies. I don't need any of it. Effective today, I'm cutting all contact with my parents and sister. If anyone here wants to maintain a relationship with me, they can reach out independently. But I will not participate in this family's dysfunction anymore. My father found his voice, trying to re-establish control. You don't mean that. You're angry, but you'll calm down and realize family is family. I picked up my laptop and the printed documents. No, Dad. I mean every word. You chose Celeste at every turn. You made me feel worthless while elevating her. You taught me that my achievements meant nothing, and her existence meant everything. So now I'm choosing myself, and that choice is final. I walked toward the door. Celeste shouted after me, "You're going to regret this. You'll end up alone with nothing but money, and you'll realize too late that family was what mattered." I stopped and turned back one last time. Celeste. I'd rather be alone with my self-respect than surrounded by people who treat me like this. Enjoy the inheritance. I hope it brings you the happiness you've always sought at my expense. I walked out of that restaurant into the November rain, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt free. The 3 months following that confrontation were strange and difficult in ways I hadn't anticipated. I blocked my parents' phone numbers, filtered their emails to a folder I checked once a week but rarely opened, and removed them from all my social media accounts. My mother attempted to visit my office twice, but my receptionist turned her away with the message "ID prepared. Harper is not available for family visits. Please respect her boundaries." The emails that did get through were exactly what I expected. My mother sent long, rambling messages about how hurt they were, how I was tearing the family apart, how she didn't understand where all this anger was coming from. My father's messages were shorter and angrier, accusing me of being vindictive and ungrateful. Celeste sent a single text that made it past my blocks before I caught it, telling me I'd become a monster and that she pitied me. I read them all with detachment, like they were messages meant for someone else. What I didn't anticipate was how many other family members would reach out with support. Ethan called regularly to check on me. My Aunt Linda sent a care package with a note saying, "I always knew something wasn't right with how they treated you differently. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." 3 cousins I hadn't spoken to in years contacted me to say they'd witnessed the favoritism over the years and respected my decision to walk away. Even my Uncle George, my father's brother, called to say, "Your dad has always had blind spots about Celeste." I tried to point it out over the years, but he wouldn't hear it. "You did the right thing for yourself." The first few weeks were emotionally brutal despite the intellectual clarity I felt about my decision. I started therapy with the counselor Rebecca had recommended, a woman in her 60s who specialized in family estrangement. She helped me understand that cutting off family wasn't selfish. It was self-preservation. "You can't heal in the environment that wounded you," she told me during our 3rd session. "Sometimes, distance isn't cruelty, it's survival." I threw myself into my business with renewed focus, but this time from a healthier place. I wasn't working to prove anything anymore, or to earn love that would never come. I was working because I genuinely loved building this company and serving our clients. The difference in my mindset was remarkable. I made better decisions, delegated more effectively, and actually started taking weekends off occasionally. 6 months after the confrontation, my company received an acquisition offer from a national enterprise software company. They wanted to integrate our platform into their suite of business tools and were offering $3.5 million for the acquisition. I'd retain 20% equity and continue as CEO with a guaranteed salary and significant autonomy. After consulting with Rebecca and my board of advisors, I accepted the offer. The deal closed in August, 2 years after I'd cut contact with my family. I signed the papers in my lawyer's office and walked out with $2.8 million in my personal account after taxes and paying off all remaining debts. I bought a house in the Portland Hills with panoramic views of the city and the mountains beyond, a beautiful modern space that I'd chosen entirely for myself without considering anyone else's opinions. I funded a scholarship for women entrepreneurs at my alma mater. I invested in 2 other startups run by founders who reminded me of my younger self. Most importantly, I built a chosen family. Rebecca became like a mother to me, someone who celebrated my victories and supported me through challenges without expecting anything in return. Ethan and I grew close again, having regular dinners where we talked about everything from business to hiking trails to his own dating disasters. I reconnected with college friends I'd neglected during the intense building years, discovering that real friendships survived periods of distance. My employees became a tight-knit team that felt more like family than my biological relatives ever had. I started dating for the first time in years, nothing serious yet, but the possibility of opening my heart again felt like progress. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see but had never prioritized. I took up rock climbing at a local gym and discovered I loved the physical and mental challenge. I learned to play piano, something I'd dreamed about since childhood but had always dismissed as impractical. I built a life that was entirely, authentically mine. About a year after the acquisition, Ethan mentioned over dinner that my family situation had deteriorated significantly. Preston had actually been fired from his father's dealership for embezzling small amounts over several months, about $15,000 total. The family had hushed it up to avoid legal action, but Preston and Celeste's marriage was reportedly strained. My parents were aging and my father's construction company had lost 2 major contracts due to his declining health. Celeste had called Ethan, asking if he thought I might be willing to reconcile, maybe help them through this difficult time. "What did you tell her?" I asked. Ethan shrugged. "I told her that you were thriving, that you'd built an amazing life, and that you didn't need their drama. Then I told her that maybe if they'd treated you with basic decency and respect, they wouldn't be in this position." I smiled at him. "Thank you for that." He raised his beer. "That's what actual family does. We have each other's backs." 2 years, almost to the day after Id walked out of that restaurant, I received a call from an attorney I didn't know. My parents had died together in a car accident. A semi-truck crossing the center line on a rural highway. They died instantly. I felt a wave of complicated emotions, grief for the relationship we'd never had, sadness that reconciliation was now impossible, but also a strange sense of peace that the chapter was finally, completely closed. I attended the funeral but stood in the back, arriving late and leaving early. I didn't speak to Celeste, though I saw her in the front row with her daughter, both dressed in black. She looked older than I'd expected, tired in a way that went beyond grief. I caught her eye once across the cemetery, and for a moment, something like regret crossed her face before she looked away. The reading of the will happened 3 days later at the family lawyer's office, the same place where this story began. I went out of obligation, knowing exactly what to expect. The lawyer, an elderly man who'd known my parents for decades, read through the document with appropriate solemnity. As predicted, the entire estate, valued at $725,000 after final expenses, went entirely to Celeste. There was a brief sentence explaining that I'd been excluded because I was financially independent and had removed herself from family life. I sat in that office listening to the lawyer's words, and I felt nothing but a distant sort of vindication. The woman sitting across from me in expensive clothes that couldn't hide her misery had received $750,000. I'd received freedom, self-respect, and the strength to build something real. The choice of which inheritance was more valuable was obvious. After the reading, I walked out of that office into brilliant sunshine. Celeste followed me outside, calling my name. I stopped but didn't turn around. "What do you want, Celeste?" Her voice was small, broken in a way I'd never heard before. "I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry. You were right about everything. Mom and Dad did favor me, and I took advantage of it. I took advantage of you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I see it now." I turned to look at her. She'd been crying, mascara smudged under her eyes. She looked genuinely remorseful, but I also knew that regret often came only when consequences became unavoidable. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "I hope you find peace with everything that's happened. I really do. But I can't be part of your life, Celeste. That door closed a long time ago." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that you deserved better from all of us. You always did." I drove home to my house in the hills, the city spreading out below me in the afternoon light. I thought about the journey from that first rejection to this moment. My parents had said $70,000 was too risky for my dream, but $725,000 for my sister's comfort was worth every penny. They'd chosen her repeatedly, definitively, finally, and in doing so, they'd given me the greatest gift possible, the freedom to discover my own worth outside of their validation. I stood on my deck looking out at Mount Hood in the distance, and I realized something profound. I didn't regret cutting them off. I didn't even regret the years of being overlooked and undervalued, because those experiences had forged something unbreakable in me. I'd learned that the only person's belief I truly needed was my own. I'd learned that family wasn't about blood. It was about choosing people who chose you back with honesty and respect. I'd learned that walking away from toxicity wasn't giving up. It was the most powerful act of self-love I could commit. They gave her $725,000, but they gave me something far more valuable. They gave me the motivation to prove them wrong, the strength to stand alone, and the wisdom to know my worth wasn't determined by their recognition. In rejecting my $70,000 dream, they'd accidentally invested in something much bigger, my absolute determination to succeed on my own terms. Do I still think about them sometimes? Wonder what life would have been like if they'd supported me from the beginning, if they'd valued both daughters equally? Of course, the child in me will always grieve the parents I needed and never had. But the woman I became through surviving them? She's grateful for the lessons that pain taught her. She knows that the best revenge isn't success itself, but the inner peace that comes from no longer needing their approval. My parents believed my sister's wedding, house, and lifestyle were worth $750,000. They believed my business dream was too risky to support with $70,000. They were wrong about both things. Celeste's life, built on handouts and favoritism, crumbled under real pressure. My life, built on grit and self-belief, became stronger than I ever imagined possible. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. If your family doesn't see your worth, don't shrink yourself to fit their limited vision. If they refuse to invest in your dreams, invest in yourself with everything you have. If they make you feel small, walk away and build yourself large somewhere they can't diminish you. And if they choose someone else over you repeatedly, let that free you to choose yourself for the first time. My name is Harper. I'm 31 years old, and I'm standing in a life I built entirely on my own. It's more beautiful than anything their money could have bought for me. And that, more than any inheritance, is what true wealth looks like. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from family because they didn't support your dreams? Have you built something amazing despite people telling you it was impossible? Drop your story in the comments below, because your experience might inspire someone else who needs to hear it today. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and let me know you're out there building your own version of success against the odds. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about overcoming family betrayal and choosing yourself. And please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by family approval. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that sometimes the people who doubt you are doing you a favor by forcing you to prove your strength. Keep building your dreams, keep choosing yourself, and remember that the best inheritance you can give yourself is the unshakable knowledge that you're enough exactly as you are. Until next time, keep fighting for the life you deserve, and never let anyone make you feel small for dreaming big.